Good morning, friends. Go ahead and stand and let's worship together. light we find, what makes us come alive, a sacrifice of praise. A city on the hill, surrender to your will, your glory on display. Your glory on display. Awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. You're worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. You will be praised. Your love, a force of grace, consuming every space. It's uncontainable. You're coming like a flood. Our hearts are filling up. Things are possible. All things are possible. Awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. You're worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. Sing awesome. You're awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. You're worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. You will be praised. You will be praised. Your praise goes on and on forevermore. We lift the name of Jesus. Your kingdom come is what we're living for. We lift the name of Jesus. Your praise goes on and on forevermore. We lift the name of Jesus. Your kingdom come is what we're living for. We lift the name of Jesus. You're awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. Worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. You're awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. You're worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. You will be praised. You will be praised. You're awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. You're worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Be thou my heaven's Son. Heart of my own heart, whatever befalls, still be my vision, O ruler of all. Heart of my own heart. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all.
Can't go back to the beginning. Can't control what tomorrow will bring. But I know here in the middle is a place where you promised to be. I'm not enough unless you come. 'cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again?
Lord, I just want to thank you that all we have to do is cry out to you. We don't have to question whether you're going to meet us. All we have to do is ask. We just came through a season that reminded us that God is with us in difficult days. When it feels like you're far away, we know that you are with us. On difficult days, when it feels like we've been forsaken, we know that you are with us. All we have to do is cry out. That's our faith, God. That's what we believe. We trust you for it. And we give you praise for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Why don't you turn around and give somebody a big old New Year's hug? It's 2019.
Good morning. Hey. Are we all doing well on this first weekend of 2019? Good start to the new year? You're all here, so the correct answer is yes. Ha ha ha. Hey, if we haven't met yet, my name is Josiah. I'm the Connect pastor here at our Lost Creek campus, and we are very glad that you are spending your first weekend of 2019 worshiping with us. When you walked in, you hopefully received a bulletin. Looks like this. We're starting a new series today. We're going to be going through the Gospel of Luke this year, so my father's going to be kicking that off here in a bit. But before we get into that, we got a few items inside that bulletin we'd like to go over, like our connection card. If you want to take just a minute and fill that out to let us know that you were here and drop it in the bucket as you are leaving today, that would be stellar. But maybe you're new. Maybe this is your first time worshiping with us, in which case we are especially glad that you're here. And what we'd ask you to do right now is take a minute, fill out that connection card, and hold on to it, because at the end of the service, what we'd love to do is meet you right over here at the welcome area, over to your left, just lit up. You bring that completed connection card with you. We will trade you for a free gift, and we'll also just take a couple minutes to show you how you can get connected here at the church and introduce ourselves. So if you're new, we'd love to meet you over there at the end of the service. You'll also find a handout to take notes. Like I said, we're starting a brand new series today. My dad will be kicking that off here in a bit, so hold on to that so you can take notes and follow along with the message. And you'll also find a giving envelope. We are still in Christmas offering season. Will be for the next couple weeks. So if you haven't yet contributed a Christmas offering and you want to, it's not too late. You can still do it. And you can contribute by dropping your gifts in the buckets as you're leaving. You can text to give the number that is up on the screens. You can give online at horizonschurch.net and set up cool things like recurring giving. Or you can take home this envelope. It's self-addressed, postage paid, and it will make its way to us. And you'll also find this infographic. That just tells you how much it costs to sponsor an orphan in our Cambodian orphan homes for a full year. So $280 gives them everything they need: food, clothing, shelter, education, for a whole year. So if you're still considering what to give to the Christmas offering, that infographic is in there to help you out. We are also launching a couple intensives that we're going to talk about here in the video announcements, but you'll find an FPU, a Financial Peace University, insert in your bulletins. If you are looking to get your finances on track for the new year, or maybe you're just trying to figure out how to manage some of your debt, Financial Peace University is the place to be. If you are one of the first 25 that sign up, you get a discounted rate. You get half off. You only end up paying $50 for the whole kit, which normally runs $100. So if you want to sign up for that and you're interested in that, fill this out. And if you want to secure the discount, you have to have your money to me ASAP. So you can feel free to register, but if you want that discounted rate and you want it today, get me your money today at the end of the service, all right? We'll also be launching Starting Point. We're going to have a video announcement explaining what that is here in a bit. Over to my left and your right is our prayer room. There's somebody in there praying for us the whole service. So if you have a need, please feel free to utilize that. And without any further ado, the aforementioned video announcements.
Financial Peace University began about 20 years ago. I started it with a bad suit and an overhead projector. There is no doubt that this process called Financial Peace University works. Too many people are struggling with this subject of money. Too many people are struggling with this subject of money in their relationships. Well, I found out something about money. Money's actually fun if you got some. When I got out of college and graduated from college, my wife and I got married. We were so broke we couldn't pay attention. We didn't know what we were going to do. And we have to remember that it's about choices. Personal finance is about 80% behavior. It's only about 20% head knowledge. You're going to make different choices after having gone through this. It absolutely works.
Are you new to Christianity? Have you been out of church for a while and just now getting back into the swing of things? Do you have questions or doubts about the faith? If so, I'm inviting you to join me for Starting Point. Starting Point is an 8-week gathering where your questions about God turn into a conversation about faith. In a Starting Point group, you can discuss all your doubts and talk about the trickiest topics of faith, free from pressure and judgment. So if you have questions or doubts, I hope that you'll join me and my team for Starting Point. If you want to register, you can go online, horizonschurch.net, or write Starting Point on your connection card.
Hi, moms and dads. I'm Pastor Kelly, and we want to let you know about the classes going on right now for your kids. If you have your kids with you in the service, we'd like to invite them to come experience the fun and learn the important life lessons from the Bible. We also offer nursery for infants and for toddlers. If your child gets fussy with you here in the sanctuary, please be courteous to those around you and use one of our cry rooms in the back of the sanctuary. You'll be able to see and hear everything, and your kids can enjoy the extra freedom. And now, here's your lead pastor, Quint Pitts.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Happy New Year to everybody. Are you used to saying 2019 yet? Not picked. Let's start off 2019 right. Let's do a pop quiz. Isn't that great? All the kids are like, yeah, let's do a pop quiz. We're going to do it. This is going to be a memory test for if you're over the age of 40. It's a memory test. If you're under the age of 40, this is just an unfair question. But I'm going to do it anyway, okay? I'm the lead pastor. I get to do what I want. All right, so I'm going to put an image up on the screen. And when you see the image, you tell me, you yell out, what is the hometown where these people live? Take a look. Bedrock. Hey, that was good. That was 100% almost. Good. Any people under 40 knew that? Yeah, cool. Ben, how old are you? 33. And you knew that. So I figured all the 40-year-olds and above would know it, but nobody. You guys remember the song? The Flintstones. The modern Stone Age family from the town of Bedrock. They're a page right out of history. Let's ride with the family down the street through the courtesy of Fred's 2 feet. When you're with the Flintstones, have a yabba-dabba-doo time, a dabba-doo time. You'll have a gay old time. You guys remembered that. That's awesome. That is awesome. It has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about today. It does, sort of. We're starting a new series today called Bedrock. And that's the reason that we did that. Bedrock, we're going to do over the next 3 or 4 weeks, after the next 4 weeks, we're going to take a look at Luke chapter 2, the second half, where the Christmas story ends. We're going to go from Luke chapter 2, Luke chapter 3, Luke chapter 4. And in those 2.5 chapters, what we're going to see is Jesus introducing himself to the world. Now, if you're going to have a guy who's going to introduce himself to the world and have the impact that Jesus has had over the last 2,000 years, we ought to pay attention, don't you think? We ought to pay attention to what he's communicating to us as he's introducing himself to the world. And what we're going to find in these 2.5 chapters, we're going to find Jesus telling us the bedrock truths upon which he built his life. The whole rest of his ministry. And we're going to cover this year here at Horizons, we're going to cover probably the first 10 chapters of Luke's gospel. There's a lot of material in Luke, a lot of material. And we're only going to get through the first 10 chapters. But what we're going to see is everything kind of points back. As we're looking at Jesus' life, it's going to be pointing back to the things that we learn in this series about the bedrock upon which Jesus built his life, all right? So we're going to do that. We're going to go through Luke's gospel, first 10 chapters this year, but that's not all we're going to do. We got other series. In fact, next month, February, we're going to do a series on relationships, which is great, right? If you're married, you're in a relationship. If you're not married, you're still relating to people, right? So we're going to go over relationships in February. And in March and April, we're going to do 40 days in the Word. How many of you remember 40 days of prayer last year? 40 days of prayer, spiritual growth campaign. We're going to do this year, we're going to do 40 days in the Word. It's another spiritual growth campaign. We're going to ask all of our community groups to get on board and do the same thing we did last year. Everybody's on board. Everybody's going the same direction. Everybody's rowing together for those 40 days. We're going to be doing that in March and April. Also this year, we're going to do a series on apologetics like we did last year. And we're going to try something brand new. Never done this before. This year, we're going to do a series called Church at the Movies. It's going to be fun. You know that the movies and literature here in our culture keeps telling us the same story over and over again. And a lot of the story that our culture keeps telling us over and over again, that we keep telling ourselves over and over again in our movies and literature, is rooted in the gospel. We're going to pull some of those gospel lessons out of the movies, and we're going to decorate this place to the hilt. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to do that this year too, in between our series on Luke's gospel. We're going to go up through chapter 10, okay? That's the plan for this year. But right now, today, we're starting Bedrock. We're going to look at the truths that Jesus built his life on. Now, you and I get to choose, all right? Jesus built his life on 4 bedrock truths, and those 4 bedrock truths gave Jesus clarity when he came up against choices. Those bedrock truths gave Jesus the deepest desires of his heart as a human being. He was 100% God, but he was 100% human. And those deep desires of his heart, he got those desires through these bedrock truths that we're talking about. He was able to focus on his mission because of those bedrock truths. He was able to have serenity and well-being even in the midst of suffering because of the bedrock truths we're going to look at here over the next 4 weeks. Now, here's the thing. Jesus built himself on something. He had a choice to make, and he chose to build himself on the things we're going to talk about over the next 4 weeks. Guess what? You have the same choice to make. You get to choose what you build your life on. We as human beings were created in the image of God, what Blaise Pascal called the dignity of causation. We are free moral agents. We get to pick how we live our lives. God never forces you to do the right thing, does he? Has he ever held you up with a gun to your head and said, you're going to do the right thing? No, he doesn't do that. He never will do that. We get to pick what we build our life on. Some of us pick financial security to build our lives on. Some of us pick popularity. I just want to be well-liked, and we build our lives around that. Some of us pick academic achievement. Yeah, that's really what I want to build my life on, is academic achievement. Some of it's academic, or it's athletic prowess. And I want to build my life around athletic prowess. Some of us, it's some political philosophy. Some of us, it's a religious doctrine or fad. Some of us, we just kind of free will it, whatever feels good at the moment, whatever feels good at the time. We get to pick what we build our lives on. But, and this is a big but, Jesus gives us a warning that if we pick any of the things I just mentioned, eventually this is going to happen to our lives. Take a look. That's a sinkhole. Can you imagine? Can you imagine this poor family? They built this house, bought this house, thinking it was sitting on a solid foundation. They lived in this house for years and years and years, thinking they were sitting on a solid foundation. And one morning, this is what happens to them. A sinkhole. What Jesus called this in his teaching later on as an adult, he called that building your house on shifting sands. You get to pick. He gives you all the freedom in the world. You get to pick. Am I going to build my life on bedrock? Or am I going to build my life on shifting sands? I don't want that to happen to you. Jesus doesn't want that to happen to you. And trust me, you don't want that to happen to you. That would be a horrible thing, wouldn't it? All right, so here's the first bedrock truth we're going to look at in Luke chapter 2, okay? If you write this down if you're taking notes. First bedrock truth that Jesus built his life on was this: spiritual growth doesn't happen unless we are intentional. You have to be intentional if you want to grow spiritually. You cannot grow spiritually if you're passive about it. You cannot grow spiritually like a potted plant sitting in a corner hoping it happens. My son Josiah, the one that was just up here, he is an excellent musician. There was a time in his life where some guy sat him down, kind of intentionally and actively taught him some basics of music, taught him some basic chord progressions on the guitar. My son then took that intentional active teaching and he intentionally and actively practiced it. And he mastered some of it. And then he went on and intentionally and actively not only practiced what he learned, but he learned more. My daughter Jenna is a really good artist. There was a time in her life where some teacher sat her down, taught her some of the basics of composition, coloring, shading, and perspective. And Jenna, because of that intentional and active teaching, she then went on practiced intentionally and actively, practiced what that person taught her, and then she went on and learned more and intentionally and actively practice. You cannot become a good musician and you cannot become a good artist passively. It doesn't happen by accident. And that principle was never more true than in the realm of our spiritual growth. We will not, cannot become more spiritually mature. We cannot and will not become more like Christ, which is the stated end goal. If I'm a Christian, if I call myself a Christian, the stated end goal is I want to become more like Christ. It cannot and will not happen passively. We have to be intentional about it. We have to have intentional activity in our lives that will bring us to that place, okay? Luke chapter 2, verse 40. Take a look. The child, he's talking about Jesus here. This is after the Christmas story. The child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. That one sentence in Luke chapter 2, verse 40, summarizes about 10 years of Jesus' life. We don't have a lot of material here about Jesus' early life, do we? There's very little material. And guess where Jesus shows up in the very little bit of material that we do have? It's not just there so we can know his biography. It's there so we can learn what he's doing. Jesus is the one who says, come and follow me. He's the one that says, do as I do. I want to show you how to live. I'm going to show you how to grow spiritually. And in this verse right here, just this one sentence, we see Jesus grew physically. Well, how do you grow physically? You eat, you get nutrition coming into you. That's activity, and that's intentional. You exercise, there's some sort of activity. I mean, today we have to work out. Back then, they didn't have to work out because they were working. They were doing stuff with their bodies, and that allowed Jesus to grow physically. He was filled with wisdom, that verse says. Wisdom is intellectual activity and intellectual growth. And then he says the grace of God was upon him. That's spiritual growth. We see there Jesus summarized in one sentence 10 years of his life from age around 2-ish to probably age around 12-ish. Now, a Jewish child, and Jesus was a Jewish child. You remember that, right? He was a Jewish child. He, like all the other Jewish children, started spiritually growing with their mother. Their mother was the first spiritual instructor in their lives. And as soon as that baby could talk, they were taught this sort of Jewish catechism called the Shema. And the Shema was taught as soon as they could speak. And then Jewish boys, from age 6 to about age 10, they went to what was called the synagogue school. And the synagogue school was actually compulsory from age 6 to about age 10. So for those 5 years, Jesus' only textbook would have been, guess what? The Hebrew Old Testament, or what we call the Old Testament. It was the only Bible he had. That was his textbook. Now, after that, a Jewish father stepped in and very actively, it was required by the law in Jewish circles, that they were required to teach their son a trade, a craft, something that they were able to make a livelihood out of. All right? So Jesus' daddy was what? What was his trade? He was a carpenter, right? So every day, hour upon hour, Jesus and his father, Joseph, would spend time together where Joseph intentionally taught Jesus how to be a carpenter, but not just how to be a carpenter. Joseph taught Jesus how to be a man. And not just a man, a godly man. It was intentional. Now, we don't have anything like that system anymore, do we? Every Jewish boy had that experience. Did any of you work with your dad? Where you learned the profession from him? You didn't learn a profession, but you worked with him. That's just so rare nowadays, right, Mark? It's kind of rare. So we have to be, as a father with 6 kids, I have to be twice as intentional about communicating, teaching, instructing my children if I want them to have spiritual growth and opportunities. And if I want my boys to become men, not just boys in men's bodies, but men, if I really want that to happen, I have to be twice as intentional about that. So for that reason, a few years ago, and I'm not going to talk very much about this, but you know, for those of you who've been around, I started Vision Quest year with all of my boys. I took them through a year-long experience where I set out 12 different experiences for these guys, and I said, I want you to go through these in the years long, and at the end of that year, we're going to have a ceremony. We're going to invite some friends and some men who can speak into your lives and talk to you about being a man. And then from that moment on, we have a ceremony, and I say, from now on, I'm treating you like a man. I wanted to be intentional about it. Because there's nothing in our system anymore where you're intentional about that. Can I just talk about the nonsense going on in our culture for a minute? Foolishness, with a capital F, about gender. Foolishness. All right, our culture gave God the finger a few years ago about marriage, and now we're giving him the other finger about gender. You know, God can't even say you're male and female. Now it's multiple choice, right? You get to pick 17 different genders. This is the latest list I saw. That is foolishness. And we're teaching boys, it's worse on boys than it is girls, where we're teaching boys, you can't be a boy. You may not be a boy. So there are men in this church for years have been concerned about that. We've been seeing it coming and like, man, well, you know what? A group of men in our church are going to do something about it. We've been talking about it, and there's a group of men now going to do something about it. We're starting, in August, we're starting this thing called Trail Life. It's a scouting and adventure program for boys where we're going to intentionally mentor boys to become men. And we're not going to just do it here for our church. We're going to go out, what Ricky and Mark and Matt and Jerry have done with sports, in One King Sports, where literally hundreds of families hear the gospel every year because of One King Sports. We're going to go out into the community and say, hey, we want to take what One King Sports is doing for ball fields and basketball courts and volleyball courts, and we want to do that with boys, intentionally training them how to be men. Now, we're going to start that in August, and I need some men in this congregation to step up and say, I'll help with that. I'll lead for that. Because we're going to go reach out to the community and say, hey, we want to help you. You know how many boys are growing up with single moms now? I mean, you know it. And there's a way that we can overcome that deficit. If a boy grows up without a dad, that's a deficit. I grew up without a dad. I know what I'm talking about. It's a deficit. But we can overcome that deficit if we're intentional about it. And these men want to be intentional about it. So we're going to talk about that more, but that doesn't start until August. All right, so despite the fact that Jesus had this amazing growth in his life, if we're honest, Jesus was disadvantaged in his spiritual growth. Do you remember where Jesus grew up? What was the name of that village? Nazareth. Nazareth was the sticks. All right. Nazareth was the backwater. Nazareth had a bad reputation. The reputation in Nazareth was, we're going to live to make money, not make a difference for God. Nazareth was 70 miles from where all the spiritual growth opportunities were. Where were all the spiritual growth opportunities in Israel? Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, you had the temple. In Jerusalem, you had the Sanhedrin. In Jerusalem, you had all the great rabbis and all the great rabbinical schools in Jerusalem. 70 miles away from Jesus. Jesus had disadvantages about his resources. Jesus had a disadvantage about his finances. Jesus even had disadvantages about family drama. He had 4 brothers and 2 sisters that didn't like him very much. Can you imagine being Jesus' sibling? That'd be tough. You read Gospel of John, you find it where the Bible says that Jesus had family drama. Anybody here ever have family drama? Don't hold your hand up. We've all had family drama. But despite these disadvantages, Jesus grew spiritually. I think God was intentional about that. I'm just going to kind of go out there and say, I think God intentionally put Jesus in that backwater town called Nazareth and had him disadvantaged so he could show us we're in Lost Creek. It's kind of the sticks, right? Kind of the sticks. West Virginia as a state, kind of the sticks. We got some disadvantages around here. Our per capita income's pretty low. You know, our opioid epidemic is pretty high. We got some disadvantages around here. Got a lot of family drama around here. But Jesus grew spiritually despite his disadvantage, and I think that was intentional to show us that it can be done. Give us some hope, right? Because Jesus was located in the backwater town of Nazareth, guess what? Guess what? His parents went the extra mile so that he could be exposed to spiritual growth opportunities. In fact, if you're taking notes, write that down. Jesus' parents intentionally sacrificed time, money, and effort so that Jesus could be in a place of spiritual growth. All right, let's go ahead and read, where are we here? Verse 41. Every year, his parents, I would circle that if I were you, every year, his parents went to Jerusalem for the Feast of Passover. Now, that's one sentence. Every year, Jesus' parents took him to the Feast of Passover. Do you know how much time and effort is wrapped up in that one sentence? Try 17 days worth of it. It's a 5-day trip from Nazareth down to Jerusalem. It's a 7-day feast at the Passover, and it's a 5-day trip from Jerusalem back to Nazareth. 17 days. A month and a half plus, I'm sorry, not a month and a half, half a month plus of effort that Jesus' parents, so he could have this spiritual growth experience every single year, where they sacrificed not just the time and the effort to get there, you walked to Jerusalem. You didn't take the train, you didn't take the bus, you didn't drive, you walked to Jerusalem. And every year they did that so Jesus would have a spiritual growth opportunity. Verse 42, when he was 12 years old, they went up to the feast according to the customs. Folks, let me talk to the parents for a minute. We got to make choices in life. And the intentional choices that we make train our children. They do. Whatever choice we're making, this choice that Joseph and Mary made to bring Jesus to the Feast of Passover every single year, 17-day effort, that choice taught Jesus something that God was the top priority in their lives. Now I'm going to make some people mad. There's no reason for you to be mad at me. I'm not mad at you, okay? I'm Quinn. I'm your buddy. I'm your pal, okay? Not mad at you. But I'm going to pick on you for just a minute. I'm concerned, okay? I'm concerned. I have been a pastor for 30 years, and I am concerned. I've never seen it quite as bad as it is now. That we, because of the parents, because of the choices that we're making, the intentional choices that we're making, that we're teaching our children that God really isn't the top priority in our lives. He's somewhere down around 3 or 4 as far as I can tell. And you know what I think the number one competitor is? I used to think the number one competitor for the human heart was money. And I think that's still a big one when we become adults. But you know what the number one competitor for God's heart with your kids is today? It's sports. Now I just made everybody mad, right? Pitts, he's anti-sports. I'm not anti-sports. I played sports from the time I was 8 until I was 18. I aged out at 18. No college wanted me. I played sports. All of my boys played football. One of my daughters played basketball, and she cheered. I got a son now playing baseball in high school. I am not anti-sports, but I am anti-anything that wants to take its place in God where God's place should be. That's what I'm anti. And I'm telling you, folks, I know everybody in here is a good person and everybody wants the best for their kids. But when we spend week after week and month after month and year after year telling our kids we'll go to church if there's nothing better to do on Sunday, we're communicating something to them. We're telling them that God isn't important. And then we're confused and we're just distraught and we blame the church when they reach high school and college and they don't want to come to church anymore. It's because all of their childhood, we've taught them that the ball field is church and that ball is God. Because we don't tell the coach no for any reason, do we? Let's just do a rhetorical exercise here for a minute. I know you're all mad at me. I love you. I do. I love you. Let's do a rhetorical exercise. Let's pretend. Let's use the same rhetoric we use to tell people we're not going to church and use that for sports. Johnny, I know you got a big game today in football, but I'm not feeling very good, and so we're all going to stay home. Is that okay with you? Johnny would have a fit. The coach would have a fit. Are you kidding? You can't use, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't dream of doing that, would we? Johnny, I know you got a big basketball game today, but your little sister's not feeling well. So because your little sister's not feeling well, we're all staying home today. That wouldn't work. That wouldn't work. We wouldn't even try that, would we? We wouldn't try that. I'm telling you, I mean, guys like Tim Tebow played sports his whole life, and he never let that take his Jesus' place. It never took Jesus' place because his parents had him in church despite him playing sports. I know it's harder than it was when I was a kid because everybody wants to play on Sunday. I get that. I get that. But you know what? I'm willing to tell the coach no. I'm willing to tell the coach no. I'm not going to, week after week, month after month, year after year, tell my kids we're going to go to church if we're not having something else to do that day. I'm just not going to do it. It's one of the reasons we here have a Saturday evening service. If you've got something going on Sunday morning, hey, you can come Saturday night. I know, you all hate me now. I love you, but you hate me. I get it. All right. Pitts, it's easy for you. You're a preacher. You have to go to church. These people don't. You know, Shara Cron, she goes to our Salem campus, and here's what she said when I asked her about, tell me something about some of the time, sacrifice of time, money, and effort that you've done for your kids' spiritual growth. She said, my husband, Josh, and I have made the decision to be involved not only in our children's church ministry, but also in the personal education of our 4 children. We've chosen to homeschool our kids so that we could answer questions about faith that might arise during their school lessons and supplement their curriculum with additional theological and apologetics resources. Choosing to do so has been a financial and personal sacrifice for us. By doing so, we hope and pray that this will prepare them for a future of ministry in an unbelieving world. She can take the word hope out of there. She is preparing them to do ministry in an unbelieving world. Now, they may choose not to because they're free moral agents too, aren't they? They're created in God's image. They get to build their lives on whatever they want. I'm saying that because some of you have done the right thing all your life as parents. You've done the right thing, and your kids still went off the rails. I get that. That happens. How about this one? Judy Dolan. She goes to our Lost Creek campus, and she's sitting right there. Judy Dolan said, I quit my career as an aerospace engineer so I could raise my kids. She's one of 2 that I know of in this campus, 2 women who had engineering degrees. One was electrical engineering. Judy was aerospace engineering. They gave up their career so they could raise their kids. Any regrets about that? Judy? No regrets, she says. How about Whitney Chapman? She said, since the time of their birth, my husband, Jared, and I wouldn't budge in making them sure they were in church. They might not have understood, but as they grew, it became a place of comfort for them. No matter what is going on, we always do what we can to get to church, and they are excited to go. Hearing our children sing praise and worship songs and speak the word of God has been life-changing. There are days when I, as a parent, begin to get overwhelmed, but my children constantly remind me God is in control and I'm a child of God. That makes every sacrifice for them absolutely worth it. Not one of those women work at a church. They're not pastors. They're not preachers. But they're doing what they can. They're making intentional sacrifice of time, money, and effort so that their kids can have a better shot at spiritual growth. Now, we've only got 2 stories. Man, I wish I could open up your skulls and shove this in. We've only got 2 stories in the Gospel of Luke that describe Jesus' childhood after his birth. Only 2 stories from the age when he's 8 days old to the time when he's 12 years old. 2 stories. And guess where both of those stories take place? In the temple. In the temple. Folks, say what you want. Get mad at me if you want. God's telling us something there. He's telling us something. He's telling us There is no Jewish temple anymore, folks. You know what the New Testament equivalent of the Jewish temple is? You're sitting in it. The local church is the New Testament equivalent of the Jewish temple. Look, it is never too late. He's telling us, get your kids involved in church. It is never too late to do that. Never too late to do that. All right? I'm moving on before somebody throws something at me. All right. Look, write this down if you're taking notes. Jesus didn't just rely on his parents. He was intentional about his own spiritual growth. We can't ride our parents' coattails when it comes to issues of spiritual growth. We can't. Our parents can sacrifice. They can intentionally sacrifice time, money, and effort to put us in a position where we can grow spiritually. But whether we grow spiritually or whether we don't grow spiritually, that's up to us, right? That's up to us. Jesus is the same way. He's a free moral agent. He's got choices to make, and he chooses. Take a look, verse 43. This is after the feast, okay? They've gone down, 5 days down, Feast of Passover, 7 days. On the 12th day, they head back up, and they're marching towards home. But after the feast was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. But they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends, and they didn't find him. You lost the Messiah. You can't do that. If any of you ever lost any kids, don't tell me if you did. I don't want to hear that story. It's a lot. I mean, it's unthinkable, isn't it? It's unthinkable to us because the way we travel is a lot different than the way they traveled. Let me explain to you how this could happen, why it's feasible that it could happen. When the pilgrims returned to Nazareth from Jerusalem, they traveled in big convoys. Caravans is a better word. Big caravans, and the reason they traveled in big caravans was security. And the way they did it was they segregated the caravan according to gender. All right? So all the men were up front. And the idea was it's more secure that way. The men can go ahead of the caravan, make sure everything's safe, make sure everything's okay. And then the women and the children came in behind. That was the way they traveled. So how old is Jesus when this happens? He's 12. And 12 is right on that cusp, right? Between boyhood and manhood. In the Jewish culture, when you're 12, you're a boy, and when you're 13, you're a man. There was no, adolescence. How long is our adolescence now? Does that go up to 35 now? I don't know. What is that? I don't get it. I'm not sure. But there was no adolescence in Jesus' day. So he's right on that cusp. And this is not, I didn't come up with this. Somebody smart came up with this. That they think Mary thought Jesus was up front with Joseph and the men, and Joseph thought he was back with the ladies and the kids, all right? So you can see how that might happen, all right? Don't have a bad feeling about Joseph and Mary. They lost the Messiah. They're evil people. So anyway, when they didn't find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. Verse 46, after 3 days, they found him. So again, they went up one day, they had to go back one day, and then they spent one day looking. And after 3 days, they found him. And where did they find Jesus? In the temple. Underline that. Circle that. In the temple. Sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Jesus did not see this wonderful 17-day trip to the holy city as a sightseeing tour. Jesus, as a 12-year-old boy, didn't look at this trip as some exciting excursion where he's going to just do a sightseeing tour and see all the holy relics. Jesus looked at this as an opportunity for him to grow spiritually, and he took full advantage of it. Some people could say he took too much advantage of it. Just leave his parents in the lurch like that, take it off. Verse 47, everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother had a meltdown and said, son, why have you treated us like this? Can you hear her doing that? I can hear my mom doing that. Why have you treated me like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. And I love what Jesus says. Why were you looking for me? Didn't you know I'd be here? Don't you know me at all, Mom? The next time you can't find me, look in my Father's house, because that's what I'm about. He took full advantage of this wonderful spiritual growth opportunity that his parents sacrificed for. And as a result of that, we see his parents still didn't understand it. Spiritual growth requires intentional activity. If it requires intentional activity from Jesus himself, guess what? You and me, it's going to require intentional activity. It's going to be required. No shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. There are no silver bullets. There are no easy buttons. There are no hacks. You know, I've been walking with Jesus for 40 years, and I spent a lot of time. I wasted a lot of time. The devil will drive you to distraction, looking for spiritual shortcuts. There aren't any out there. The great theologian S.E. Bolton said recently that, go ahead and put that up, the world is constantly gaming us into taking shortcuts. He's not actually a theologian. He works on our creative arts team. He goes to our Barber County campus. But guess what? He's 100% right about that. The world loves to game us into chasing shortcuts. Folks, there's no great spiritual experience that's going to make your spiritual growth no longer necessary. There is no holy man that you can go to and say, holy man, please pray for me. He can pray for you till he rubs the hair off of your head, and it's not going to make you grow spiritually if you don't have intentional activity in your life. Luke gives us one sentence that summarizes Jesus' life from around 3:2 to around 12. That's back in verse 40. Luke gives us two sentences that summarize Jesus from age 12 to around 30. That's found in verse 51 and 52. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them, but his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And look at verse 52. And Jesus did what? Jesus grew. He grew in wisdom, that's intellectual growth. He grew in stature, that's physical growth. He grew in favor with God, that's spiritual growth. He grew in favor with men, that's social growth. We have so little information about Jesus in his boyhood and Jesus from age 12 to age 30. So little, almost zero information, very scant information. But all of that information is pointing us to one thing that is undeniable, that if we're going to grow spiritually, it requires intentional activity on our part. So, in light of this, in light of Jesus modeling for us right here, he models this for us. What's your next step? One step this week. I know at the beginning of the year, it's kind of tempting sometimes for us to overload ourselves with New Year's resolutions. That doesn't help. But you could take one step this week. What's the next one step that you could take this week to get some spiritual growth going in your life? Some of you, a great next step would be for you to join a community group. Community groups. We talk about 3 to thrive here at Horizons. 1, come to church and worship with us on Sunday. 2, get involved in a community group. Community group is a small group of Christians that we pray together, we worship together, we read and study the Bible together, and we eat together. Not in that order. And the third one is not only come to worship with us on Sunday, get involved in community, but serve in a ministry. If you do those 3 things, we think you can thrive spiritually. And it'd be great for you to take one of those steps, get involved in a community group. It's without a doubt, I think it's the best thing we do around here for spiritual growth, is you get involved in a community group. Some of you, a great next step would be to check out, finally check out Celebrate Recovery on Friday nights. Folks, you don't have to live with that addiction. You don't have to live with that life-controlling thing that you try to get rid of and you've resigned yourself that you can't get rid of. You don't have to live with that. Did anybody notice this week in USA Today, on the front page of USA Today, Celebrate Recovery being talked about in USA Today? On the front page. USA stinking today. If USA Today is going around promoting a Bible-based, Christ-centered recovery program or anything else that's Bible-based and Christ-centered, it's got to be pretty special. That would be a great next step for some of you. Youth group. Dawn, you are prejudiced. But he's right. Our youth group, some of you, it meets on Wednesdays from 6:30 to 8-ish, 8:30-ish. And man, it is phenomenal. Every one of my children have been involved in our youth group. And every one of my children have benefited from that youth group. It's called Lift. You can check it out on Wednesdays. Another great next step, some of you would be a great next step if you went home today and you downloaded the YouVersion Bible app. And you said, I'm going to do a Bible reading plan, and I'm going to start today. That YouVersion Bible app is money, folks. It is fantastic. Another great next step, some of you would be, hey, I'm going to teach myself to pray today. I'm going to learn how to pray. And I'm going to learn how to pray. I'm going to go to the online prayer center. That Horizons Church created the online prayer center at onlineprayercenter.com. And there's 2 prayer tracks up there. You pick a prayer track and you learn how to pray. Folks, any one of those would be a great next step for you this week. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't pick 3 or 4 of them. Pick one. Say, I'm going to do that this week. I'm going to do one thing to grow. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you that because of our example that Jesus gave us, this bedrock upon which he built his life, the whole rest of his life, the ministry of his life, we know, God, we can do this. We should do this, and we can do this because you showed us how to do it. You told us, do as I do. Follow my example. God, we know that nobody puts on a cape and becomes super godly person overnight, but we can take a step towards that. We can take a step towards that this week. And I pray you would help us to do that. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Thanks for coming out. Hey, if you're new, I'd love to meet you right over here for a few minutes.
morning, friends. Go ahead and stand and let's worship together.
Not gonna wait for the walls to fall. I know a name that will bring them down. I've got a praise waking within my soul. I'm not ashamed to declare it now. Light of the world, tremble the darkness. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Every word will be accomplished. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Prepare the way, the King of glory comes. Before his name, every fear must bow. Throw off your chains, Jesus destroyed them all. Up from the grave, he is with us now. Light of the world, tremble the darkness. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Every word will be accomplished. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. The gates of hell will never stand a chance. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. No word will fail, no weapon formed against. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. The gates of hell will never stand a chance. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. No word will fail, no weapon formed against. Your name prevails, Jesus the great I am. Light of the world, trample the darkness. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Every word will be accomplished. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Light of the world, trample the darkness. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Every word will be accomplished. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise. Nothing can stop it. You are the God of the promise.
Here in your light we find what makes us come alive, a sacrifice of praise. A city on a hill, surrender to your will, your glory on display. Your glory on display. Awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. Worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. You will be praised. You love the force of grace, consuming every space. It's uncontainable. You're coming like a flood. Our hearts are filling up. All things are possible. All things are possible. Awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. You're worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. You're awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. Worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. You will be praised. You will be praised. Your praise goes on and on forevermore. We lift the name of Jesus. Your kingdom comes, what we're living for. We lift the name of Jesus. Your praise goes on and on forevermore. We lift the name of Jesus. Your kingdom comes, what we're living for. We lift the name of Jesus. You're awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. Worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. Awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. You're worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised. You will be praised. You will be praised. You're awesome in this place. Jesus, you are awesome in this place. Worthy to be praised. Jesus, you are worthy to be praised.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, existence, now and always. Thou and only first in my heart. My King of heaven, my treasure thou art. High King of heaven, my victory
I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again?
Lord, thank you. Thank you that we can take that question and take the question mark out of it. You promise us that you'll meet us here again. We just came through a season that reminded us that God is with us. He's with us. You were intentional about that, God. You weren't passive. You didn't wait around. You went first. We are so grateful that we can count on you. When we feel forsaken in every other way, we can count on you. When it feels like the world is collapsing around us, we can count on you. Even when it feels like you're not around, we can still count on you. We're so grateful to you, God. And we give you praise in this new year, and we ask you, God, to help us this year to be twice as resolved, Lord, to live for you, to grow in our relationship with you, and to share your message throughout this world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey, God bless you. Turn around and give somebody a big old New Year's hug, handshake, or a high five. Welcome to Horizons.
Fire before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storms. Fire before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storms. Fire before us, you're the brightest. You will lead us through the storms.
Hello, everybody. How we doing? Hey, Tom, sit down. Go back. Get out of there. Stop holding Sid up. No, Sid's being too friendly. Sid, sit down. I'm talking here. Hey, Happy New Year, everybody. I haven't seen you all probably since the new year began, and you're spending your first weekend of 2019 with us. So far, your new year is great, right? Because it's here with us. It's here with me. You're here with me to start off your new year. That's not all that great. Don't let me fool you. Thank you, Sid. I'm excited about that. Hey, when you, first of all, if we haven't met yet, my name is Josiah. I'm the Connect pastor here at our Lost Creek campus. And we are really, truly glad and excited that you're worshiping with us on this first weekend of 2019. When you walked in, you hopefully received a bulletin that looks like this. We're starting a brand new series today. We're going to be going through the Gospel of Luke this year, so my dad will be kicking that off today. But before he gets into that, we got a few items inside that bulletin that we like to go over every week, like our connection card. So if you're a regular, take just a minute, fill that out just to let us know that you were here. Drop it in the bucket as you're leaving. If you are new, recent, maybe this is your first time worshiping with us. We are extra glad that you are here celebrating and worshiping during this first weekend of 2019 with us. And what we'd love for you to do is to hold on to that connection card, fill it out, and at the end of the service, bring it over to the welcome area over there to your left. At the end of the service, we will take that connection card from you. We will we'll give you a free gift in exchange, and we'll also just take a couple minutes to introduce ourselves and show you how you can get connected here. Because it's a big church, and you might wonder, what can I do to take my next step here? And we'd love to introduce ourselves and show you how to do that. All right. So if you're new, recent, we'd love to meet you over there at the end of the service. You'll also find a handout so you can follow along with today's message. Like I said, we're kicking off a brand new series, so you want to hold on to that. And you'll also find a giving envelope. We are still in Christmas offering season, at least for a couple more weeks. So if you're still praying about what you'd like to contribute to our Christmas offering, you can give a number of ways. You can drop your gift in the bucket as you are leaving the services today. You can text to give at the number that is currently up on the screens, or you can go online to horizonschurch.net and click on the Give tab. You can do cool things there, like set up recurring giving. That's what I do. Or you can take this envelope home with you. It is self-addressed and postage paid, and you just drop it in the mail with your gift, and it'll make its way to us. Also, as you're thinking through that, once again, you'll find this infographic in your bulletin. Just as a reminder, this kind of lays out the costs to support one of our orphans in our Cambodia orphan homes for a year. So $280 gives them everything they need as far as food, clothing, shelter, and education for an entire year. So if you're still praying and considering what to contribute to the Christmas offering, that is there to help you with that. Also, we have 2 intensives starting up on January 20th, 2 weeks from now. We got Financial Peace University and Starting Point. Financial Peace University is a great intensive to be involved with if you're looking to reduce debt, get your finances in line, or just learn some better financial best practices. All right? Now, the cool thing about this is the guy who leads it, Jared, has funded a number of these kits, and the first 25 that register get a discounted rate. If you pay in full today, if you pay $50, you get the kit, the license rather, today, rather than paying the full 100 plus, give or take, for those kits, which is a pretty phenomenal deal. And I will tell you, I don't know the exact number, but we've already had some people take us up on that. So if you're thinking you want to do that, do it today. Come see me at the end of the service and get your money to me, all right? So that is in there for your benefit, and we're going to explain all of these a little more in some video announcements, all right? I'm going to be up on the screen in just a second to talk about Starting Point, so I'm not going to bore you with that. All right? Over to my left and your right is our prayer room. There's somebody in there praying for us right now. In the entire service, they will be praying for us, as a matter of fact. So if you have a need and you want some prayer, please feel free to utilize that. And now, without any further ado, here are those aforementioned video announcements.
Financial Peace University began about 20 years ago. I started it with a bad suit and an overhead projector. There is no doubt that this process called Financial Peace University works. Too many people are struggling with this subject of money. Too many people are struggling with this subject of money in their relationships. Well, I found out something about money. Money's actually fun if you got some. When I got out of college and graduated from college, my wife and I got married. We were so broke we couldn't pay attention. We didn't know what we were going to do. And we have to remember that it's about choices. Personal finance is about 80% behavior. It's only about 20% head knowledge. You're going to make different choices after having gone through this. It absolutely works.
Are you new to Christianity? Have you been out of church for a while and just now getting back into the swing of things? Do you have questions or doubts about the faith? If so, I'm inviting you to join me for Starting Point. Starting Point is an 8-week gathering where your questions about God turn into a conversation about faith. In a Starting Point group, you can discuss all your doubts and talk about the trickiest topics of faith, free from pressure and judgment. So if you have questions or doubts, I hope that you'll join me and my team for Starting Point. If you want to register, you can go online, horizonschurch.net, or write Starting Point on your connection card.
Hi, moms and dads. I'm Pastor Kelly, and we want to let you know about the classes going on right now for your kids. If you have your kids with you in the service, we'd like to invite them to come experience the fun and learn the important life lessons from the Bible. We also offer nursery for infants and for toddlers. If your child gets fussy with you here in the sanctuary, please be courteous to those around you and use one of our cry rooms in the back of the sanctuary. You'll be able to see and hear everything, and your kids can enjoy the extra freedom. And now, here's your lead pastor, Quint Pitts.
Hey guys, welcome. Happy New Year to you. It's 2019. We can dispense with the 2000 thing, right? I wanted to do that when it hit 2010. I don't like 2010, 2020. I like 20. It's easier to say, isn't it? 2019 is easier to say than 2019. Let's start off the new year right. Let's have a pop quiz, all right? Let's do a pop quiz. This is going to be a pop quiz it's going to be a memory test if you're over 40, which could be dangerous. It's going to be an unfair question if you're under 40, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm the lead pastor, I get to do what I want. All right, I'm going to put an image up on the screen, and you just yell out, what is the name of the hometown where these people lived? Bedrock. That was almost 100%. How many of you knew that answer? That's awesome. Did anybody under the age of 40 know that answer? Really? Are they like still showing it? Are they still showing Bedrock? Twist, twist, Flintstones. Are they still showing the Flintstones? Yeah, anybody remember the song? Let's sing the song. Flintstones, meet the Flintstones. They're their modern Stone Age family. from the town of Bedrock. They're a page right out of history. Let's ride with the family down the street through the courtesy of Fred's 2 feet. When you're with the Flintstones, have a yabba-dabba-doo time, a dabba-doo time. We'll have a gay old time. Excellent. Way to go. I think we're probably the last generation of Americans that will ever have something like that where everybody knows how to sing one song, right? Maybe SpongeBob SquarePants will be there. I don't know. I don't know that one. All right, so that had absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today. No, I'm just kidding. It does kind of have something to do with what we're going to talk about today because we're starting a new series today called, guess what? Bedrock. We're calling it Bedrock because we're looking at over the next 4 weeks, we're going to look at 4 bedrock truths upon which Jesus built his life, okay? We're going to look this year, over the course of the year, we're going to go through the Gospel of Luke, all right? And we're going to probably only get through about Luke chapter 10 because there's a ton of material in Luke's Gospel. And we're not going to just cover Luke's Gospel. We're going to do some other things. For example, next month, February, we're going to do a series on relationships. The Bible has some amazing, really good insights about how to conduct our relationships. It'll be great if you're married. It'll be great if you're not married, because we all have relationships, don't we? We all do. And we're going to talk about that next month. In March and April, we're going to do 40 days in the Word. Anybody remember last year we did 40 days of prayer, spiritual growth campaign. We're going to do another spiritual growth campaign in March and April called 40 Days in the Word. And we're going to ask all of our community groups to do this again, where we did last year. We get everybody on the same page, everybody row in the same direction, and we're going to do 40 Days in the Word in March and April. This year, we're also going to do another series on apologetics, like we all do every year. We're going to try something brand new, though, that we've never tried before. In the summer, we're going to do called what's Church at the Movies. Church at the Movies. Do you know the stories that we keep telling ourselves over and over again in our movies and our literature? Those stories, a lot of those stories, are just 100% stolen from the gospel. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of take a look at some of the movies, and we're going to pull lessons, Bible lessons out of those movies. We're going to decorate this place to the nines. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we've never done it before. It's going to be exciting. Anyway, that's what's coming up over the course of this year. But the series that we're in today, if you got your Bible, it's Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2. And this series, we're going to look at the second half, where the Christmas story ends. We're going to go from the second half of Luke chapter 2, we're going to go through Luke chapter 3, and we're going to go through Luke chapter 4 over the next 4 weeks. And what we're going to find there is we're going to find Jesus introducing himself to the world. Now, if you have a man who had the kind of impact that Jesus Christ had over the last 2,000 years, and you got a chance, there's not a lot of information in here about this, but if you got a chance to find him introducing himself to the world, I'd say that's pretty important stuff. We ought to pay attention, don't you think? Because what we're going to find is, over the next 4 weeks, we're going to find 4 bedrock truths upon which Jesus built his life. It gave him clarity when he had choices to make. It gave him serenity when he went through storms and struggles. It also gave him a focus with his mission. It also opened the doors to the deepest longings of his heart as a human being. Remember, he was 100% God, but he's also 100% human. And what we're going to find is that Jesus isn't putting this stuff in the Bible just so we can have biographical information about him. That would be just maddeningly unhelpful. What Jesus is offering to us here is he's saying, do as I do. Follow me, right? He's been saying that for 2,000 years. Follow me. I want to show you how to live. I want to show you how that you too can have clarity in your choices. You too can have serenity when you go through storms. You too can have focus on your mission. You too can figure out a way to open the door to the deepest longings of your heart. And we're going to learn how Jesus did that, and hopefully we're going to follow along right after him. Because Jesus had a choice to make, didn't he? Just like every one of us, Jesus has a choice on what he's going to build his life on. We're going to find in the next 2.5 chapters of Luke what he built his life on. In fact, his ministry for the next 22 chapters of Luke, guess what? all of it refers back to what we learn about Jesus here in these 2.5 chapters we're going to look at over the next 4 weeks, okay? Jesus made an intentional choice about what he built his life on, and guess what? You got to do the same. We all do. We all have a choice to make when it comes to how are we going to live our lives, what are we going to build our lives on. Jesus gives us 100% autonomy in that. He lets us make our choice. We are free moral agents. You and I both, we're free moral agents. We have what Blaise Pascal called the dignity of causation. We get to make things happen. We're created in God's image. He never forces us to do the right thing, does he? You're not a robot. You're not an automaton. You get to choose what you're going to build your life on. Some of us choose to build our lives on financial security. Some of us choose to build our lives on popularity. I just want to be well-liked. Some of us, we build our lives on some sort of political philosophy. Some of us build our lives on athletic achievements and prowess. Some of us build our lives on academic achievements and prowess. Some of us, we build our lives on a religious fad or a religious doctrine. We build our lives maybe we just free will it, whatever feels good in the moment, whatever feels good at the time. And we have total freedom to choose to build our lives on any of the things I just mentioned. But here's what happened. Jesus gives us a warning. Later on in his life, when he becomes an adult teacher, he says, if we build our lives on any of the things I just mentioned, eventually this is going to happen to us. Take a look. That is a sinkhole. That just happened not too long ago in Florida. Can you imagine? This family built that house. They lived in that house for years, maybe decades, thinking that that house was built on something solid. It was built on bedrock. And look at it. That happened one morning when they woke up and realized that their house wasn't built on bedrock. It was built on sinking sand, is what Jesus called it in his teaching. I don't want that to happen to you. Jesus doesn't want that to happen to you. And I assure you, you don't want that to happen to you. So we're going to hopefully learn some things over the next 4 weeks about how we can build our lives on solid bedrock, okay? First thing that Jesus built his life on here in Luke chapter 2, write this down if you're taking notes, is this. Spiritual growth only happens when we're intentional about it. We got to be intentional about it. In other words, I don't grow spiritually if I just sit around passively hoping it'll take place. Like a potted plant, over in the corner, waiting for somebody to water me. It doesn't work that way. My son, Josiah, the one that was just up here, he is a really excellent musician. The reason he's an excellent musician today is that one day, a friend of his named Joe Bernowski stepped into his life and intentionally and actively taught him some things about music. Taught him about how chord progressions work on a guitar. Taught him some basics about the guitar. My son Josiah then intentionally and actively took what Joe taught him and he mastered it and practiced it. And then after he mastered and practiced the things that Joe taught him, guess what? He intentionally and actively went out and learned more. Now my daughter Jenna is a really good artist. Now, she had, at one point in her life, somebody stepped into her life and taught her some things about being an artist. Taught her how to look at coloring and how to approach shading and how to get perspective and how to compose a painting. She stepped into her life and taught her those things intentionally and actively. Then Jenna intentionally and actively practiced everything that she learned from that person. And then she went out and not only mastered that, but she went out and learned more on her own, intentionally and actively. Now, folks, you cannot become a good musician, you cannot become a good artist passively. It doesn't happen by accident. And that principle is never more true than it is when it comes to you and I in our spiritual growth. It just doesn't happen if we're not putting some activity and intentionality behind it. If Jesus himself, and we're going to learn in this passage, Jesus himself was intentional and active about his spiritual growth. Guess what? If Jesus had to be intentional and active, you and I have got to be intentional and active if we're going to grow spiritually, because it just won't happen automatically. Luke chapter 2, let's start reading at verse 40. And the child, he's talking about Jesus, and the child grew and became strong. That's physical growth. How do we grow physically? You got to eat, right, Dr. J? You got to eat, and you got to be active, right? You got to move your body around. Maybe we have to exercise here. Back in Jesus' day, you didn't have to exercise. You were working your butt off, right? So, but you have to move around, and you have to eat and drink water, right? That's activity. It says Jesus grew and became strong, physical growth. He was filled with wisdom. That's intellectual growth. That requires intentionality and effort to grow intellectually. And the grace of God was upon him. That's spiritual growth. Now, that's all that Luke tells us. That one sentence right there summarizes Jesus' childhood as a boy in Nazareth. That one sentence. From the age of around 3 to the age around 12. 10 years. Right there in that one sentence. A Jewish child got spiritual growth, first of all, from his mother, right? A mother, they had this kind of catechism kind of a thing called the Shema. And as soon as a Jewish baby was old enough to talk, the mother started teaching Jesus this Shema, all right? And then what would happen when they got to be about 6, boys at least, it was compulsory upon the boys, they had to go to what's called synagogue school, what we would call synagogue school. And in synagogue school, from age 6 until about age 10, Jesus would have had his only textbook would have been, guess what? The Bible, the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament. Of course, he didn't have the New Testament back then. And they would learn how to read and study the Bible in the original Hebrew language, okay? And at from age 6 to 10. And then what would happen, it was Jewish law actually, that a father had to take his son and had to train him in a trade or a vocation. The Jewish father was responsible to make sure his son could have a livelihood where he could provide for his family. And not only teach him how to, what was Jesus' daddy? What was he? He was a carpenter, right? So Joseph didn't just teach Jesus how to be a carpenter. He spent hours upon hours with him, not just showing him how to put wood together, but showing him how to be a man. The Jewish system was very intentional. It wasn't like, oh, I hope we can do this. I hope he can become a man someday. The Jewish system was very intentional about the father taught the boy how to be a man. And not just a man, but a godly man. That was the idea. We don't have a system like anything like that anymore, do we? I mean, did any of you, there's a few usually, did any of you work with your father and learn some craft or learn a trade or something? You did, Tasha? You're not a man, though. But you did. Any men work with their dad? Yeah, that happens some. Since that system no longer exists, we as fathers, I as a father of 6 kids, 4 boys, I've got to be twice as intentional about making sure that my boys grow up to be men. So I started doing it when Josiah was a kid, and I've done it with all 4 of my boys. I take them through what I call the Vision Quest year. You've heard me talk about it, so I'm not going to talk about it much. But it's 12 months where I say, hey, here's some challenges for you. I got some physical challenges. I got some spiritual challenges. I got some academic, kind of intellectual challenges. And for these 12 months, you're going to go through this thing. Starts out with the talk. And we're not talking about football. We're talking. And it always traumatizes them. It traumatized every one of my boys. I guess they figured out I got a grandchild coming, so they must have figured it out. But anyway. But we close it with a ceremony. 12 months later, we close it with a ceremony where I invite men who have had an influence, men from his family, maybe some coaches he had. We invite them, and they speak into this young boy's life, and they talk to him about what it means to be a man. And then we say collectively, from now on, we're going to treat you like a man. Now, I had to be intentional about that. I don't think it just happens anymore, right? We don't have any system like the Jewish. Now, look, our society has gone bonkers lately. Am I the only one that's noticed this? I mean, it's foolishness. And I'm not afraid to call it that. It's stupid with a capital S. Our society is stuck on stupid when it comes to gender. It's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I think we're up to 17 different possible genders now. That is ridiculous. And we're telling boys are the biggest victim of this. We're telling boys, you can't be boys anymore. We're telling boys, you may not be men. You may be something else. Look, the people at this church, the men of this church, there's been a bunch of them that said, we got to do something about that. And we've been talking about it for years. Well, guess what? They decided this year we're going to do something about it. And so I'm happy to tell you that in August, we're going to launch a scouting and adventure program for boys called Trail Life. And I'm really excited about this. It's kind of like what Mark and Ricky and Matt and Jerry are doing with sports, with One King Sports, where they're going out to the community and saying, hey, we want to offer you a sports league, and we're going to preach the gospel to you while you're playing ball. We're going to preach the gospel to not only the kids, we're going to preach the gospel to the parents. And what we're doing is we're going to I hope we can kind of dovetail what One King Sports is doing and say, hey, if you like what's going on with One King Sports, now we can bring a discipleship piece to it, where we're actually mentoring these boys to be men. I think we have to be really intentional about that anymore. I don't think that just happens anymore, does it? Especially with the nonsense that's going on in our society right now, that we have to be really clear and really intentional about how we approach that. Despite his amazing growth, and Jesus did have amazing growth, despite that, can we just say that he was disadvantaged? Can we say that? Is that okay? Where did he grow up? What was the name of the village he grew up in? Nazareth, right? Nazareth is the sticks. Nazareth is the backwater. There wasn't a lot of spiritual growth opportunities for him in Nazareth. There wasn't a lot of resources in Nazareth. He grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. He had family drama. Do you know that Jesus had 4 brothers and 2 sisters that didn't like him very much? Read that in John chapter 7. I think it's John chapter 7. But anyway, he had family drama. But despite the fact that Jesus had a lot of disadvantages, he grew spiritually. Now, I think that's the genius of God. I think God intentionally put Jesus in this backwater town of Nazareth when all of the real spiritual growth opportunities were where? Jerusalem. What's in Jerusalem? The temple's in Jerusalem. The Sanhedrin is in Jerusalem. The great rabbis are in Jerusalem. The great rabbinical schools are in Jerusalem. 70 miles away from Jesus. He grew up in this backwater town with not a lot of opportunities. And guess what? Despite that, he grew spiritually. I think that's an encouragement to me. That's an encouragement to you. We're in Lost Creek. We're in West Virginia. You talk about the backwater of the United States. We're it, right? All the stuff that should be down is up, and all the stuff that's up is down, right? that's kind of like, we're used to that. But we can grow. Any of you ever feel like you're disadvantaged in your spiritual growth opportunities? Any of you ever have family drama? Don't raise your hand. I know. Jesus, because he was located, because of where he grew up, his parents, I love this about them, his parents went the extra mile to make sure Jesus had opportunities to grow spiritually. And write that down if you're taking notes. Jesus' parents intentionally, actively sacrificed time, money, and effort so that Jesus could have spiritual growth opportunities. Take a look. Let's start reading verse 41. Every year, I would circle that if I were you. Every year, his parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. Now, that's one sentence, okay? One little sentence in the Gospel of Luke. Do you know how much time, money, and effort tied up in that one sentence? Try 17 days. 17 days of effort. You had to walk. Remember, there's no buses, there's no trains. You had to walk from Nazareth to Jerusalem. That's a 5-day walk. You had to then spend, the Feast of Passover was 7 days long. It's a week long. And then you had to walk 5 days back to Nazareth. 17 days are tied up in that one little sentence where Jesus, every year, his parents took him to the Feast of Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the feast according to the custom. Parents, can I talk to the parents for just a minute? You and I, as parents, we got to make some choices. We got to make choices. Mary and Joseph made a choice. to intentionally sacrifice time, money, and effort so that they could put Jesus in a place where he could grow spiritually. And you know what they communicated? Do you know what they taught Jesus when they made that intentional choice? That, hey, we're going to sacrifice 17 days. We're going to sacrifice all the money it takes to make this trip. We're going to sacrifice all the time and effort to make this trip. Do you know what they communicated to Jesus when they did that every year? They communicated to Jesus that God is number one. He's number one. We do that as parents. When we make intentional choices, we communicate and teach. Whether we like it or not, we are communicating and teaching. Whether we even know it or not, we are communicating and teaching by the intentional choices that we make. My father made an intentional choice to teach me how to be a man when I was about 9 or 10 years old. He never sat down and said, Quint, I'm going to teach you how to be a man today. Here's what he did. Every Sunday, not every Sunday, there was more of it in the summer, less of it in the spring, and less of it in the fall, almost zero in the winter. But almost every summer, Sunday evening, he would come along and he would sit down in his chair and he'd say, come over here, I want to talk to you. He'd give me a list of chores. Usually there was 2 or 3 items. Sometimes there'd be as many as 5 items. But there'd be 2 or 3 things. He'd say, now I want you to do this by Saturday. Sunday night. I want you to do this by Saturday. And my father then, he said, do you know how to do this? Are you okay? You got any questions about this? No. Well, here's what's going to happen. On Saturday morning, this family's going to get in the car and we're going to go do something fun. Sometimes we would go to Cool Springs. Sometimes we would go to the game farm. Sometimes we'd go down and play on the trucks, the fire trucks at the fire department. But he would always have something he knew I wanted to do. And he'd say, now on Saturday morning, we're all going to get in the car. We're going to go do this thing unless you don't have this list done. And if you don't have this list done, you're going to stay behind and do this list while we go do it. Genius. Genius. I hated the man. No, I'm just kidding. I thought he was the meanest dad in the world. Because you know what? There was many Saturday mornings where little Pitts is sitting on the stoop of the front porch saying, please don't let me go too. I'll get it done as soon as you get me back. I promise I'll get it done. And my father never caved once. No matter what my tears, no matter what my protestations, I thought he was the meanest man alive. So he'd take that list down and he would put it on the refrigerator. And here's another genius about him. He never brought it up again for the rest of the week until Saturday. He never badgered me about it. He never said, hey, did you get that done yet? Hey, did you get that done yet? Hey, did you get that done yet? He put it on the refrigerator where I could see it every single day. I saw it a lot because I was in the refrigerator a lot. And he never bugged me about it. But when Saturday morning rolled around, little Pitts better have his list done if he wants to go have this fun. You know what my father taught me by that? He taught me not just to be a man. He taught me to be responsible. He taught me to be a self-starter. I think he set me up to be a leader. He taught me, hey, take the initiative. Don't wait for somebody to come along and point out and say, do this now and do that next and do that. You do it. You figure it out. Go do it. And you know what? I lived my whole life thinking nobody owes me a thing. That's a good way to live. I don't feel entitled to anything. I don't feel like the world owes me something. I don't have a chip on my shoulder, and I owe it all to my Father. He didn't teach me anything spiritually. We didn't go to church or anything like that, but he taught me by the intentional choices he made around this whole chores thing for about 3 years, and then he died when I was 12. So, we are giving our children lessons, whether we recognize it or not, by the intentional choices we're making. Now, I'm going to make everybody mad here, okay? You ready? Ready to get mad at me? I'm not mad at you, so there's no reason for you to get mad at me, but you're going to get mad at me, okay? Just remember, I'm Quint, and I love you, all right? But I am concerned. I am really super concerned that at this point in our culture, that we are, as parents, we are communicating to our children by the intentional choices that we make. We are communicating things that our rhetoric isn't matching. So we tell our kids, we're all good Christian folks here, we tell our kids God's number one in your life. God should be number one in your life. God's number one in our life. And then we go out and make intentional choices week after week, month after month, year after year, where we say we're only going to go to church if there's nothing better to do. I used to think that the number one rival for God in my children's heart would be money. I don't think that's true anymore. I think the number one rival of children's hearts, American kids' hearts, is sports. Now you hate me, don't you? I love you, all right? Don't get mad at me. I'm not mad at you. Sports, we communicate to our children that sports is the highest priority of our lives by the choices that we make. Not by what we say. I mean, nobody says it. I don't think anybody that's a Christian or sitting in this room would probably say that. But when you week after week, month after month, year after year, you say, I'm not going to tell the coach no for any stretch or imagination. I'm not going to tell him no, but I'm going to tell God no every Sunday. Let's just do an exercise in rhetoric for a minute, okay? Can we try this? Just an exercise in rhetoric. You're going to love this. The excuses that we use not to come to church. Could we use those in the football field? Not a chance. Hey, coach. Hey, Johnny, I'm a little tired today, buddy. I know you got a big game today, but I'm a little tired. You know, I had to work 6 days this week, and we're going to stay home. We're not going to go to your ball game. What? Would that work? Would that work? We wouldn't even think of doing that to our kids, would we? No, because sports is so important to us. We're teaching our kids by our intentional choices that the ball is God and the ball field is church. I know you're mad. Don't send me any emails because I'll just delete them, all right? But I'm telling you, I love you guys. I am concerned about this. It is much harder, and you have to be more intentional. Now, look, I know a lot of you are going to say Pitts is just anti-sports. I'm not anti-sports. I played ball. I played football, baseball, and basketball, and golf even. I was on the golf team at my high school. Oh, my gosh. You know? I played sports from the time I was 8 until I was 18. I aged out. Nobody wanted me in college, but I aged out. But, you know, and I went and I told, all of my boys played football, every one of them. And my son, Jordan, now is playing high school baseball. And he played Babe Ruth baseball, and one of my daughters played basketball, and she cheered. I'm not anti-sports. I'm not. I am anti-anything that takes God's place. And man, we are teaching our kids by the choices that we make week after week, month after month. We're teaching our kids that soccer ball is God. Would you be able to tell your little Johnny he had a big ball game, and would you be able to tell him, well, your little sister, she's sick today, and she's not feeling well, so all of us are going to stay home, and we're not going to your game? We wouldn't do that. It's unthinkable. But we say that about God all the time. I'm not going to go to church today. Well, why? Well, because little Sally's got a sniffle. Okay, leave Sally at home, and the rest of you come. Jesus, we only have 2 stories. We only have 2 stories that talk about Jesus' childhood in Luke chapter 2. Once you get past the Christmas story. We have 2 stories. Where do both of those stories center? Where is Jesus physically located in both of those stories? The temple. Don't you think God's telling us something there? God's telling us we got to get our kids involved in church. We don't have a Jewish temple today. The New Testament equivalent of a Jewish temple is you're sitting in it. And both of the stories of Jesus in his childhood, both of them center around the temple. One when he was dedicated and one that we're reading right now. Now look, I know some of you are saying, I know it's harder. It's harder than when I was first starting 20 years ago as a parent. It's harder because sports leagues want to push you to do everything on Sunday. One of the reasons we have a Saturday evening service. Just saying. I know you all hate me. I love you, though. It's easy for me because I'm a preacher, right? Well, guess what? Shira Cron, she's not a preacher. She goes to our Salem campus. Here's what she said. I asked some of my friends, when have you as a parent intentionally sacrificed time, money, and effort to give your kids spiritual growth achievements or opportunities? She said, my husband and I have made the decision to be involved not only in our church's children's ministry, but also in the personal education of our 4 children. We've chosen to homeschool our kids so that we could answer questions of faith that might arise during their school lessons and supplement their curriculum with additional theological and apologetics resources. Choosing to do so has been a financial and personal sacrifice for us. And by doing so, we hope and pray that this will prepare them for a future of ministry in an unbelieving world. She can take the word hope out of there. She is preparing them to do ministry in an unbelieving world. She's doing it. Now, here's the thing. The kids are also free moral agents. The kids also are created in God's image. The kids also, every son and daughter in this room, you also have the freedom to choose whatever you want to build your life on. And the reason I'm saying that is some of you parents have done everything right, and your kids still walk off the rails. It happens. How about this one? Judy Dolan. She attends this campus. She said, I quit my career as an aerospace engineer so I could raise my kids. She's one of 2 women that I know in this campus right here, 2 women I know who have engineering degrees and engineering careers that they gave up so they could raise their children. That's a pretty big sacrifice. Here's what Whitney Chapman said. She's sitting here, right? Right there she is. She said, since the time of their birth, my husband Jared and I would not budge on making sure they were in church. They may not have understood, but as they grew, it became a place of comfort for them. No matter what is going on, we always do what we can to get to church, and they're excited to go. Hearing our children sing praise and worship songs and speak the word of God has been life-changing. There are days where as a parent begin to get overwhelmed, but my children constantly remind me that God is in control and that I'm a child of God. That makes every sacrifice for them absolutely worth it. 3 women who said, hey, we're making some sacrifices in time, money, and effort so that our kids can grow spiritually, and none of them are pastors. It's never too late to start this, folks. It really isn't. It's never too late to start this. Let's go ahead. Let's move on because you hate me now. Write this down if you're taking notes. Jesus didn't just rely on his parents. Jesus he was intentional about his spiritual growth too, all right? If you're a son and a daughter, you cannot ride your parents' coattails into heaven. And you cannot grow spiritually riding on your parents' coattails. You also have to be intentional and active if you're going to grow spiritually. Your parents can make choices to put you in an environment where you can do that, but you have to make those choices. And Jesus certainly did. Take a look. This is after they've made the 5-day walk from Nazareth to Jerusalem. They've had the 7-day Feast of Tabernacles, Feast of Passover, and now they're getting ready to head home. After the feast was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began to look for him around among their relatives and friends, and when they did not find him, you lost the Messiah. You can't do that. Can you imagine? I can't imagine. Can you imagine? This is absolutely crazy. We can't even think about that, can we? That you would actually walk or travel a whole day and not realize, oh, we left the kid at home, left him at the rest area or whatever. It's not possible in our day, but it is very possible. Let me just tell you how this can be feasible, okay? Because when I first read this story, I thought, they're making that up. How could a parent be so stupid, to lose their kid? But it's really easy to see. They traveled back to Nazareth in a caravan, okay? Hundreds of these folks would be together, and they always segregated the genders, all right? So you would have men in the front of the caravan. The ostensible reason was because they would provide security, all right? The men are going to get out in front. They're going to make sure everything's safe. And then the women and the children trailed behind, okay? So I didn't come up with this. Somebody smart did. That they think that Jesus, because he was how old? 12. He's right on that cusp between being a boy and being a man. In Jewish culture, you were a boy when you were 12 and you're a man when you're 13. There was no adolescence. You know, we don't adolescence today. You're a boy until you're 12, and now you're an adolescent until when? 35? I don't know. How long does that go? I'm just kidding. But there was none of that. All right. So this is what I've settled on, and smart people think this is what happened. Mary thinks that Jesus is up front with Joseph and the men, and Joseph thinks that Jesus is back with the women and the children, but he ain't. And they find out. Take a look. After 3 days, there was a day up walking. They had to walk a day back, and then they had a day of searching. 3 days. They found him, and where was Jesus when they found him? In the temple. In the temple. And he was sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Jesus took this opportunity that his parents sacrificed for, and he said, you know what? I'm not going to treat this as a sightseeing tour of the holy city. I'm going to go and I'm going to grow spiritually. And he sat down with these rabbis, and he listened to them, and he talked with them, and he asked them questions. He took advantage of it, maybe to the extreme. You know, when he realized, hey, it's time to go home, and he's not there. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother had a little meltdown here. She goes, son, why have you treated us like this? Can you hear her saying that? I can hear my mom saying that. You treated me so bad. Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. And I love Jesus' answer. Why were you searching? Didn't you know I'd be here? Mom, don't you know me at all? I'm going to be about my Father's business. You guys went to great expense and effort to get me here. I'm going to take advantage of every single second in my Father's house so I can grow spiritually. They didn't understand. Spiritual growth requires intentional activity. It doesn't just happen. There are no shortcuts. There's no spiritual experience you can go out there and have, and it's going to vault you to some new level of spiritual growth. There's no great holy man out there who you can go and get him to pray for you, and you're going to vault yourself to great spiritual growth. You know, that holy man can pray for you so much he rubs the hair off of your head, and it's not going to make a lick of difference if you're not intentionally and actively trying to grow spiritually. There are no shortcuts. I've been walking with Jesus for 40 years, and I can say with almost no fear of contradiction and almost 100% certainty that there are no spiritual shortcuts to our growth. The great theologian S.E. Bolton said it best. He said, the world is constantly gaming us into taking shortcuts. He's actually not a theologian. He works on our creative arts team, and he goes to our Barber County campus. But he said that in our meeting on Monday, and I loved it. I said, he's 100% right. The world will drive you to distraction. Satan will drive you to distraction, looking for some spiritual easy button. And there ain't none. There ain't none. It requires intentional activity if I'm going to grow spiritually. So, in light of this, in light of Jesus modeling for us, hey, here's a bedrock that I'm building my life on. I'm going to be intentional about my spiritual growth. In light of Jesus modeling this spiritual growth formula of intentional activity, what's your next step? What's your next step? This is the beginning of the year, isn't it? Isn't this a great time of the year? It's a great time to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take one step. I don't think you should go home and write 12 resolutions and any of that stuff. I think, what's one step I can take? Some of you, it'd be great if you got involved in a community group right now. You know, community group is one of the best things we do for spiritual growth. You can talk to Josiah about how to get connected to one of those community groups. That's where we get together as a group of Christians. We pray together, we read together, we study the Bible together, and we eat together. In my community group, we do that in the other direction, though. We eat first in my community group. Hallelujah. Yes, hallelujah. Dr. J's involved. Another one, maybe a great step would you to finally check out Celebrate Recovery. That'd be a great spiritual next step for some of you. Did any of you notice this week's USA Today on the front page of USA Today one time this week, I can't remember what day it was, is Celebrate Recovery, front and center. The headline is Celebrate Recovery, how it's making a difference around. If USA Stinking Today is recognizing a Bible-based, Christ-centered recovery program, it must be making a difference around here. Maybe some of you could check that out. You don't have to live with that life-controlling thing. You don't have to live with that life-controlling hurt, habit, or hang-up. You can get rid of it. You can be free from it. You can get victory over it. I promise you. We've got dozens of people at this campus and Salem campus who'll tell you the same thing. You can get freedom. How about another great step? Maybe one of you, this would be a good step for you. Go home and download the YouVersion Bible app and say, I'm going to do a Bible reading plan. I'm going to start today. That'd be a great next step. Maybe one next step for some of you might be this. I'm going to learn how to pray this week. I'm going to go to the online prayer center. We designed that thing, and it teaches you. You can click on one of those prayer tracks, and I'm going to learn how to pray this week. Anyway, whatever it is, do it. Just one step this week, one step, okay? God bless you. Have a great week. If you're new, I would love to talk to you right over here, okay? Thank you for the 3 fans. I appreciate that.